Hi, everyone. I want to take you back on a little trip to a 7th grade classroom. My 7th grade classroom was not your typical 7th grade classroom, and I'm going to talk to you about my Spanish class. Now, we only had about 10 kids in our Spanish class, but one day we were all gathered around the computer screen to make sure we were all on the camera. And looking on the screen, I saw about a dozen faces that looked very different from ours, and they were all waving and shouting, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" And with 6 months of Spanish under our belts, the class from suburban Philadelphia met the one from rural Honduras. For the next 45 minutes, we talked about music, movies, school, and food. We bonded with these kids. Then the next year, we each got a pen pal from Israel. We would correspond back and forth with them every couple of months, writing in Hebrew. And then in 8th grade, we got the chance to go to Israel to meet our pen pals. We bargained in the shuk, we slept in Bedouin tents, and we even celebrated holidays with the locals. Today, I still keep in touch with my pen pal on Facebook, watching as all of them join the army and trek through desert mountains, watching from the safety of my home. These experiences, talking with people thousands of miles away, have been some of the most valuable moments of my education as a whole. Well, I was having a great time, but what I didn't realize was that my brain and my future were reaping incredible benefits that no one could see. In 2009, psychologist Ellen Bialystok conducted a study comparing bilinguals and monolinguals' performance on a variety of different tasks involving the executive control centers of the brain. These control centers are called the CEO networks because they deal with judgment and analysis, memory, and achievement. And what she found was that the bilinguals outperformed the monolinguals on every single one of these cognitive tasks, especially the ones involving multitasking. And then there was neuroimaging researcher Kathy Price, who found something incredible in the brains of bilinguals. She found that they had more gray matter in the parts of the brain that are associated with vocabulary acquisition. Now, why did this happen? She explains that these areas of the brain actually get a workout while learning another language, just like any other muscle in the body that you could go and work out at the YMCA right now. The difference is that gray matter in this part of the brain makes this area of the brain work more efficiently and function faster. Now, of course, all of this science is very important, but I would say that the most overwhelming amount of data exists for what knowing another language can do for us in today's globalized workforce. The Department of Education's Language Ed arm found that 1 in 5 jobs today are somehow linked to international trade. And recruiter Korn Ferry International took a survey that found that 9 out of 10 headhunters in Europe, Latin America, and Asia say that knowing another language is critical for success in today's job market. And finally, Ryan McMunn, the CEO of BRIC Language Systems, says that in 2014, those who entered the workforce with dual language fluency could expect up to 10 to 15% increase in pay. So, learning just one other language can make us more efficient, help us learn vocabulary faster, make us more valuable in the workforce, along with a host of other benefits. So, with all of these incredible outcomes, I want to ask you a question. How? How could it possibly be that between the years of 2009 and 2013, language enrollments in higher education dropped by 111,000 spots? And why? Why are only 7% of college students in America currently enrolled in a language course? When I moved to public high school, I was exposed to many shocking realities that most of our country considers normal. At my old school, learning another language took priority over almost anything else. But what I found is that in the majority of the country, this is not the case. Now, less than 1% of adults who learned a language in a US classroom would say that they're still proficient in that language now. Now here in the audience today, can you please do a show of hands if you learned a language in a US classroom in middle school or high school? Raise your hand, raise your hand. All right, that's a nice showing. Now I want you to keep your hand up if you would still call yourself proficient in that language today. Okay, pretty much everyone's hands went down. So what we see here, and what I've experienced firsthand, is whatever we are doing in public schools in America to teach languages, it is not working. While considering what I would speak about today, I decided to think back over the past 4 years of public school education, and I decided to try to hone in on where I saw that public schools might be failing us. So I settled on 2 key challenges. The first is that I noticed that fear is the enemy of growth and learning in the classroom. With our current system, we've inspired a monstrous fear of being wrong. Second, talking to many students, I found that most students think school is like a bubble, where the real world is hardly acknowledged. Classes teach all the time about what's going on inside of those walls, but rarely what's going on outside. So, what if we used world languages as a vehicle to improve all of these issues with the current education system? It opens up a world for our students, which will be hugely important later in life, especially in the workforce. And it instills a sense of compassion when our students learn what it's like for the rest of the world to learn English. So this comes in 2 key steps. First, we need to bring language learning to the forefront of education as a whole. Second, we need to alter and revamp the way that languages are taught in classrooms today. First comes the need to prioritize language studies. Currently in US classrooms, languages are treated as an afterthought. Now in 2014, let's think about the AP exams. The amount of students that took the AP psychology exam was more than the amount of students that took every single language exam combined. Next, 53% of Europeans would say that they are proficient in another language, not just English, as you can see here on this chart. But a mere 18% of Americans are proficient in another language. In today's modern, globalized society, this is the time that we need to be emphasizing world languages. Why are we shying away from them? If done well, learning another language in a classroom will teach students that failure is not only acceptable, but failure is quite necessary. When learning new words, students will find that failure is absolutely vital to them becoming more proficient in another language. But our current system doesn't work this way. Our current system hones in on memorization. In the current US language classroom, students are forced to memorize dozens of isolated words and phrases and conjugations that don't necessarily help them converse. Now, this type of learning instills a fear of being wrong, which is the same fear that exists in a history classroom when asked about the date of a battle that happened hundreds of years ago. Now, I know that it seems daunting to try and change the status quo, but the truth is that there are small steps that each of us can take in order to reap the true benefits of language learning. Well, we find ourselves in quite a difficult position because we're going to need teachers to teach the next generation world languages. But right now, our system is not preparing these students to become the next teachers. They're not equipped to do this. So we find ourselves in the classic chicken or the egg situation. We're at a standstill. All right, so here's what we need to do. We need to look at what we can do now within the confines of our broken system. How can we make this better for the future? Students, do not accept these classes as they are. If your language teacher talks to you in English, you know what? Respond back in the language that you're learning. Do not be afraid to make mistakes, because these mistakes are how you will ultimately learn this language and become better. Talk to your friends in this language as much as you can, whenever you get the opportunity. Language lobbyist Bill Rivers once said, "It's not that people don't think learning another language is important. They do. It's that they don't think it's possible. But it is." Now, more than ever before in history, I'm optimistic that we can take this into our own hands. Look at this technology. With apps like Duolingo and Slow Spanish News, technology has given us a gift, the ability to Skype at will with friends and family in other countries whenever we want. Technology has given us these tools that, if we use them, can revive, revamp, and completely change the world language aspect of America. Teachers, what would happen if we released the expectation that students needed to speak perfectly? What would happen? What would happen if we stopped relying on textbooks? What would happen if we started relying on conversation? Drawing pictures, acting it out, conversing with their students about things that are important to them. All too often, these curriculums, even the ones that I've sat in the classrooms of, have been riddled with passages about ancient artwork and convoluted wars, and even worse, stories fit for toddlers. What would happen if the teachers brought in articles about current events in the country that speaks the language that these students are learning about? Let's engage the students, and they will begin to care too. En los años de colegio, he utilizado estas ideas para aprender y entender idiomas diferentes. Translation. In my years of high school, I've used these very tactics to help myself learn and understand different languages. אני מקווה שהמורים והתלמידים שומעים אותי עכשיו, ושאתם יודעים שזה בידיים שלהם לתקן את הכיתות. Translation. I hope that the teachers and the students across the nation hear what I'm saying. They hear my message and they understand that it is in our hands to alter the course of these classrooms. I want to say one final thing. This is important not just because it matters in the classroom. This is not an isolated topic. This is important because it matters in the real world. This matters because of the two women that I met at the airport last year who were on the verge of tears because they were about to miss their flight and no one could understand them. They were speaking Spanish. I went up and talked to them, gave them directions to their gate, and they made it with time to spare. This matters because on my Israel trip 2 years ago, there were 2 Ethiopian immigrants to Israel who didn't speak a word of English, and they were left out of every single conversation until my friends and I, who spoke Hebrew and English, went over to them, sat by them, and translated every single word, so they felt included. This matters because of the connections you will make. This matters because of the worlds it can open. And most of all, this matters because it is accessible to each and every person sitting in this room right now. Thank you.